Hey guys, this is Hex and Shadow here trying to give you a sniper tutorial, help you out, improve your game. This is the total video, but I've also broken it down into segments and uploaded it to weedclantv.com, so check it out with a written guide. Alright, so we're going to talk about the zeroing of your rifle. As we said before, below your screen, down the bottom, you have the down direction on your D-pad, which will cycle you through different ranges for your zeroing. Zeroing your rifle, imagine when you fire your bullet, it exits the barrel and uh, your bullet's going to rise because of the way the bullet spins and the heat. Your bullet technically goes above the enemy's head on longer ranges. 100 meters, like what I'm aimed at right now, is different in real life. But essentially the theory is if the bullet's going to shoot up, and then gravity and the bullet velocity is going to kind of start to slow down. Gravity will start to pull it down, and your bullet will drop, thus bullet drop. And the idea is when you zero, so I'm zeroed at 100 meters and my enemy is at 100 meters out, my bullet's going to come up, and when it falls down, it's going to intersect back down where my crosshairs meet, which would be 0. It's going to intersect back down on that point as it's heading down back to the ground at 100 meters. So it's going to reach 0 at 100 meters. So if I switch my 0 to 300 meters, now my bullet's going to hit intersect with my 0 again at 300 meters. So if my target's at 100 meters but I'm zeroed at 300 meters, that bullet is still going to be above my target's head at 100 meters, and it's not going to line up with my target's head until it was at 300 meters. So I would shoot over my target. That's why the zeroing is important. So you can see if I'm zeroed for 100 meters and my target is 100 meters out, all I have to do is line up the center of my crosshairs on his head and pull the trigger. And we're gonna go ahead and drop this guy. Well, it didn't knock him down for some reason. There we go. So you can see the bullet hole right there in the middle of its head. Good to go, right? So now let's imagine that this target is still 100 meters out, but our 0 is set for 200. So what we need to do is we actually need to aim lower. This way when our bullet comes out of our barrel and it rises, if I'm aimed lower on his chest, the bullet is going to rise above that. And we're going to try to technically hit the opponent in his head as the bullet is rising before the bullet ever drops. So to do this, you know that your 0 is at 200 meters and you know your enemy is at 100 meters, so you're going to subtract those. Your 0 is 200 minus the range of 100 is a 100 meter difference. So we need to aim the scope down to a certain point to make up for 100 meters. That's where these little dots come in. I call them hash marks. They're also famously known as mil dots, but the distance from the center of my crosshairs, the 0, to 1 mil dot is going to be a certain meterage, which I can use. So let's say, for example, that 1 mil dot equaled 100 meters. If I'm trying to make up 100 meters, then I'm going to lower, and I'm basically going to use that dot to point and use to shoot. So if 100 meters equaled 1 mil dot, right there would be a headshot. Now that is not the case. 100 meters appears to be perhaps just a third of this. So we're going to actually aim right here. So here, if I was perfectly zeroed, I would land it right here and just square up my 0 right on his face of my crosshairs. But I'm going to lower it just a little bit, and we're going to intersect with his head. And then we'll do the same over here just to try and knock this one down. See, and that one landed right in his forehead, or in his chin. So let's change it to 400 meters. The same principles apply. 400 meters minus my range of 100 meters leaves me with a 300 meter difference. So now we're pretty sure that 1 mil dot equals 300 meters. So I'm going to try to shoot straight for his chest, but I've got to make up 300 meters, so I'm going to aim low 300 meters. That bullet is going to rise right into his chest. That's the theory. And for some reason, it did not do that. Scope attached. We're going to talk about what happens if you're set for a 0 for 200, but your target is still 100 meters out. Now, again, your 0 is just the point at which your bullet will have traveled and will intersect back with that horizontal line. It'll drop back down to the 0 point and cross your crosshairs at 200 meters. So I have it set for 200 meters. My target's at 100 meters though, so that bullet is still going to be rising by the time it would intersect with where my opponent is. And since it's still rising, it's actually going to shoot over his head. And it won't be for another 100 meters that the bullet will finally drop down and land back where his head would be, but by that point it's already past my enemy, so I'm going to miss my shot. So you have to adjust for that. You could adjust for that by switching your 0 back to 100 meters, but that's going to take some time. So instead, you can just adjust. If I was 0'd for 100 meters right now and I pulled the trigger, I would hit square in the center of his face. But since I'm 0'd for 200 meters, I need to lower my aim a little bit, so that basically we're going to hit our enemy in the head as the bullet is still rising before it ever hits its peak, before it can do any drop. So I've lowered it just a little bit. On a 20 times scope for an SR61 rifle, one hash mark equals 300 meters. Okay, so I'm only 200 meters for my 0, 100 meters for my range. I'm going to subtract those. That's a 100 meter difference. I only need to lower my rifle to adjust for 100 meters. If I was adjusting for 300 meters, I would bring that little hashed mark, the first one, all the way down. But that's going to be too low in this case, so I only need to go 1/3 of that way to adjust for 100 meters. And we're going to pull the shot. Oops. We're trying to knock this one down real quick so we can get this one back up. Alright, and you see right there in his chin, I hit him. So even then I aimed a little bit too low. Okay, so to further demonstrate, we're now 0'd for 400 meters, and we're going to go over here to these are also 100 meters out. We're at 400 meters now for a 0, minus the 100 meters for our range is a 300 meter difference. I know that each hash mark on my rifle equals 300 meters. So I'm going to lower my scope 300 meters down, one hash mark. I'm now basically using that hash mark, that first hash mark that's above my crosshairs, as my point for shooting. That's what I'm using instead of the center of my crosshairs. So I'm going to line that up with the center of his head and pull the trigger, and that should be a dead center headshot. Go ahead and drop this guy. And you can see right there is where we aimed, and that's where we hit. That's a beautiful illustration of what I'm talking about. Now, if your target, if you were zeroed for only 100 meters, but your target was 400 meters out, well, if he was 400 meters out, your bullet would intersect with that line at 100 meters, and you would fall short. You'd never hit your target. So you would have to aim higher so that your bullet has more time to drop back down where you want to do, where you want to hit. So if he's 400 meters out and my zero is 100 meters, that's negative 300 meters difference. So I've got to raise my scope up 300 meters. Same principle. It's just a matter of if your zero is less than your range, you have to shoot higher. If your zero is greater than your range, you have to shoot lower. Now, we're going to talk a little bit of a more technical thing, and if you're not using the rangefinder, this can be a little tricky, but I'm going to explain to you how this doesn't really matter anyways, okay? If I'm up on an elevation and my target is on the ground level, the shooting and the range and my zero is going to be different than if I had been on the ground level with them. See, if I'm right here, my target is 95 meters out. We're on the same elevation, and it's a straight line from my shoulder to his shoulder, 95 meters. However, if I was up on an elevation, now imagine a triangle where from me to him on the ground is one line and is one leg of the triangle. From me on the ground to me up there is one leg of the triangle. And then from me up here to him is the slope, the side of the triangle that's the longest. On a scaffold like this, which is probably like 5 meters tall, that difference from 95 meters to 101 meters doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's mathematically unnecessary. But if I was on top of a tall skyscraper that's 200 meters tall, well, now you can do a little bit of math and realize that from here to there is 100 meters. But if I was on top of a 200 meter skyscraper, well, we're going to use Pythagorean theorem, and we're going to find out that 200 squared, by the way, Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And c squared is the distance from me on top of the skyscraper to my target down on the ground. We're trying to find out what that distance is. So a squared would be me to my target on the ground, which would be 100 meters. So 100 squared plus me on the ground to me on the tower is b squared. That's 200 meters because the tower is 200 meters tall. 100 squared plus 200 squared equals what? It equals 10,000 plus 40,000 is 50,000. So 50,000 equals c squared. We're going to do the square root of both of those to cancel out c squared. It makes it c. So c equals the square root of 50,000. Now, I'm not sure exactly what that is off the top of my head, but it's going to be more than 100. In a severe situation, for instance, if my target was 300 meters out and I'm 200 meters up in the air, there's a huge difference than if I was on the ground. If I was on the ground and my target was 300 meters out, then I would just 0 to 300, line up my shot, and shoot. But if I'm on top of a 200 meter tower, c, or c squared, equals 360 meters. And you can do the math. I've written it out in my tutorial here. But 360 meters, that's different. 600 or 60 meters is the difference between aiming up on your guy at 300 meters out and pulling the trigger, and instead of hitting his head, you're going to hit him in the chest, which is just going to get you a hit marker and alert him, and he's going to run away. So it does matter. Now, how are you going to figure that out? First of all, even if your target is stationary, you would have to know the height of every tower in the game that you're going to stand on. And you're assuming he's on ground level. Well, what if he's also on a smaller tower? Well, now he's maybe 100 meters off the ground, so really you're not 200 meters higher than him, you're only 100 meters higher than him. See how complicated that can be? Imagine every tower of every map and you have to know that. That can be pretty crazy. Fortunately, there aren't many towers in the game that are tall enough to give you that kind of mathematical necessity. Most of the towers are small enough where it's not going to be the difference between 300 meters and 360 meters. It's going to be the difference between 300 meters and like 310 meters, and that's not going to change your shot a whole lot. It's not going to matter. That's the good news. Now, there are some towers that require that, and the good news about that is you don't have to do the math. You don't have to figure out the heights. Eventually, you know, the first time you take that shot, you're going to miss because you're not going to have that 60 meters that you were supposed to be paying attention to that you didn't. But after 10 times taking that shot, you're eventually going to realize, when I'm on this tower shooting at someone over there on that tower, I need to aim about this much higher or lower if I want to hit that headshot. And you'll just get the feel for it. It takes practice and experience. Now, the best way to deal with the elevation problem is the rangefinder, because the rangefinder changes and it already does all that math for you. So here, my rangefinder, you can see, is saying 98 meters out, 97 meters out to that target. When I get up here and I point at them, it is changed to 100 meters. So my rangefinder does that math for me. That's why I love the rangefinder. Its precision is uncanny. It takes out all the guesswork. It takes out all the estimation when it comes to range and trying to figure it out. And most times your enemy doesn't even have that orange 102 meters above his head. You know, most of the times you're over here and you got a guy on the roof and you just have to figure out, see, I know that roof is 175 meters out. If I didn't have that rangefinder, I'd kind of have to eyeball it and be like, oh, you know, it's in front of Charlie, so it's less than 280, but it's more than 100, so somewhere in between, and you'd have to guess. And you might guess wrong, or you might be off just a little bit, and that's going to mess up your shot. I love the rangefinder, and I would never get rid of the rangefinder. Now we've got motions and target. You've reached the advanced level of the training, and we need to deal with, we've dealt with aiming up and down the vertical axis of our crosshairs, but now we need to deal with the horizontal axis. Obviously, I've got my scope zeroed for 100 meters. These targets are 100 meters out. So if this was if it wasn't moving, I would just line up on its head and shoot, right? Well, if I do that here, I'm going to line up. You see I'm pointed on his head, and I'm going to fire. But I missed. He ran past my bullet because I didn't lead him. He's in motion, and it takes time for your bullet to travel from your gun to your target's head. And in that time, he's already left that spot. So you have to lead your target out at least just a little bit. So we're going to lead him just about right there, and I still missed. Now, what I do know through testing is that this lower two targets moves slightly faster than your walk. So it moves slightly faster than this, but it moves a lot slower than this. And then the top one there moves a lot faster than this, your normal walk, but it moves just slightly slower than your sprint. So I can out sprint that. Now what that means is you can sit here on the test range and you can practice this, but when you go out to fighting an actual opponent, your opponent is going to be running faster than that, so you have to lead your real life opponent even more than you would lead this target here. Okay, so by leading I mean he's moving to the right. I've got to put my bullet to the right of him just a little bit so that when he runs, when I fire and my bullet intersects with him, he's going to run into my bullet essentially. And I led him a little bit too much with that one. So let's come over here and you see how that was? So what I'm aiming for is about, you've got one hash mark over is a small line, two hash marks over is a longer line, and then the third hash mark over is a smaller line again. I'm trying to aim between the second and third hash mark. You see how I did that? You can go back and you can pause it. I aimed directly between the second and third hash mark, right there in that sweet spot, right there. And that's a headshot. Right there, and that's a perfect chest shot. Now, this is, I repeat, for the 20 times scope on the SRR-61. The SRR-61 has a really high bullet velocity. So the bullet travels in a straight line for longer before bullet drop affects it. For that reason, the 20 times scope, each line, each hash mark that up and down on my bullet or on my crosshairs equals 300 meters. A 20 times scope on a CSLR-4, which has a lower bullet velocity, is going to equal a different amount than it does on the SR-61. So 20 times scopes are not all the same all the way across the board. The only thing that's the same about them is that they're all 20 times magnification. But your hash marks are going to equal different distances. Your bullet drop's going to be different. You're going to have to equate for that differently. And your leads, how much you have to lead by, is going to be different because the bullet is getting to the target faster with this gun, so I have to lead it less than if I was using the CSL-4, where the bullet velocity is lower. Then the bullet is traveling slower, and it's going to reach its target in, it's going to take longer to reach its target, so I have to lead further out than I would with the SRR-61. That's what makes the SRR-61 such an easier gun to use. That being said, we have to figure out how far we have to lead for different speeds. So I have to lead a target that's moving fast like this a lot further than I do a target that's moving slow. So target moving slow, we've already decided on a 20 times scope for the 20 or for the SR-61. I need to line up my shot about 2.5 mil marks to the left or right of whichever direction he's running. On this target who's running faster, I know I need to lead him much further than 2.5 mil marks. We're gonna go ahead and reload. So down here, again, I'm zeroed for 100 meters and they're 100 meters, so I don't need to worry about going up and down any. I just need to line up the leading on my horizontal line. So I'm 2.5 lines out and chest shot. Probably lower kidney. Yeah, right there. Okay, so you see how that works? Now let's say we change our 0 to 400 meters. Now I need to lead my enemy and equate for the bullet drop and all that I'm gonna have to deal with. So I'm 400 meters for my 0, 100 meters for my range. That's a 300 meter difference, so I need to aim down 300 meters, which is one line. See, I'm now not aiming, I'm trying to aim for his head. I'm no longer aiming with the center of my crosshairs because I've adjusted by aiming down. Now I also need to lead him, still the 2.5 mil marks, so that's going to be a headshot. So now, if I'm looking here, technically, I've lowered, on a stationary object, I've lowered my scope 300 meters down, and I'm leading, if this target was moving to the left, I'm also leading 2.5 meters out. So you can see there's no longer a dot where I'm technically aiming, which is 1 millimeter up and 2.5 millimeters to the right, or to the left. Right there. So this would be a headshot if this was one of the targets that's in motion on the bottom rack. And that's what we're doing here. And I'm going to show it to you right here. 2.5 meters and mil marks, boom, headshot. I think that's a pretty clear illustration. See how beautifully that works. Now on these, again, you'd have to do it slightly different. I'm still zeroed for 400 meters, so I'm still lining up my shot right there, and look at that. I didn't see, I'm pretty sure that's 5 mil marks out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're on the third little smaller hashtag, and that's where we're leading from. Yep, that's perfect. So on that one, we are still 300 meters down, and then we're 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 millimeters, giving them a lead. So right there, I'm aiming 1 millimeter up and 5 millimeters to the right. That would be a headshot right there if that target was moving and was one of these right here. And you can see I drilled both of them right in the face. I make it look easy, but it takes practice, and it takes knowing your scope. So what you need to do is you need to figure out which rifle you like. I like the SR61, and then you need to figure out which scope you like to use. And I like to use the 20 times scope or the 8 times scope. And then you need to come here and you need to figure out how to work your zero and how to do that math, right? You got to get that concept down of subtracting your zero from your range. 100 meter difference, 200 meter difference, 800 meter difference. And then you need to know how many meters does each of your mil marks equal. If you can do that, then you can make any shot. So 1,000 meter zero minus 100 meter range is a 900 meter difference. I know that each of my mil marks equals 300 meters. I'm going to lower 300, 600, 900, and I should hit him right there on the top of his head. Okay, in that second circle. That's all it takes for a stationary target. You can hit, if you can do that, you can hit every stationary target in the game, as long as you're not rushing yourself and messing yourself up by stressing out. Okay, the moving target's a lot harder, especially at longer ranges, but even that you can come to figure that out eventually. Ooh, I missed. Ooh, through the chest, which is what I was aiming for, but still. That was on the far right of his body, I bet. Yep. So, it just takes practice and getting used to your weapon and your scope and knowing your weapon.